Today I'm going to show you how to make a cute little wood flower arrangement. Both of these small items are from the Dollar Tree. The little crate, or if you're using a small wood box, this will be the same procedure. And you can leave the little fencing piece on or off, totally up to you. So the first thing you're going to do is put some moss down, which I skipped here. You're going to see me sneak it in later, but it's a lot easier to put a little moss over the floral foam to start. And then we're going to green our arrangements. We want to start with a base layer of greenery. Here I'm using some nice spiral eucalyptus. And so you're going to want to take the sprigs and kind of push them up towards the top, as long as you have a piece of greenery that has movable sprigs, and create a fluffier, more voluminous section of the greenery. And then you're going to trim the stems to the length that you need. So you don't necessarily need them to go all the way to the bottom of the box. And you want the greenery to be able to kind of come right over the edge of the box. So you don't necessarily want to put the greenery straight up and down like it was growing up. You want it to kind of go out, up and out all around the sides. And so if you've got one type of greenery, go all the way around. If you've got two types of greenery, which I'm going to be using, then you're going to want to leave some space for the other type of greenery as well. So the best thing about using the floral foam is that it is something that's easy to move. So you'll see me adjust pieces as we go around. So I'm sneaking some of the other greenery, which is some boxwood, kind of along the sides, in between the pieces of eucalyptus. And then I also want to put some straight up in the center of the box. So I'm just going to trim the wire there and fluff it out a little bit. And so you're going to continue going around and adding greenery to your box. I'm also going to add some of these rose leaves, which I'm actually going to slide right on the stem of the other piece of greenery, because they don't come on a stem, they come all by themselves. And let those kind of sneak over the box. You could get creative with these. If you don't like how they are when you put them on the stem, you could cut them apart, glue them to stems, sneak them in along the side of the box as individual leaves. You can kind of play around with that. They can stick up, or they make sort of a nice element coming out at the bottom of the box as well. So I'm going to do that with one more piece of the greenery here. So again, the most important thing, no matter what greenery you have, is to make sure that you are creating a nice base for the flowers. So spread that greenery out, intermingle the different types of greenery together. And it's okay if you can still see some of your floral foam, because the flowers are going to fill that. So up next, we are going to stem our flowers. Oh, so here's where I sneak the foam in, or the moss in, to cover the foam. So much easier to do on the early end, but if you're like me and you forgot, you can absolutely sneak that in afterwards. And sometimes, in all honesty, you don't even need it. If you've got enough coverage with your greenery and no one can see inside your box, then it's not necessarily something you have to do, more just if you want to. In this case, I am using some of the moss from the Dollar Tree that is green, but you can use Spanish moss that's a little more dried out and brown as well, or skip this step. All right, so now we're going to clean up a little bit of our mess from the moss, and we are going to fluff the greenery. This one little sprig, I didn't like how it was sticking up, so I'm going to cut it off, and then later I can always add that back in somewhere else. So trim, rearrange, add in whatever else you might need. One of the things that's really important is to make sure that you look at your arrangement from all sides. So it might look good in one direction, but then you may need to change the way the greenery is, or add a piece somewhere else if you turn the box and see there's sort of a spot that you might have forgotten. So I'm trying to mix the leaves from the rose leaves with the eucalyptus, so it's not just a piece sticking out, and it looks a little bit more cohesive. All right, so now we're going to stem our wood flowers. So today I've got some nice blue and ivory and yellow. Of course, these can be any colors at all. And to stem the flowers, what you're going to do is, I like to at least, start by trimming the bottom. You do not want to trim where the string is. The string is what's holding it together. But if your bottom is really uneven, take a pair of scissors or your wire cutters and then just trim. Then you're going to add a little dab of glue and push that wire about 1/4 inch into the flower. You can also choose to stem your flower first, meaning poke a little hole in it, pull that wire out, and then add the hot glue to the flower and put the wire in. I do recommend putting the hot glue on the flower versus on your stem, just because there's more of a chance of that dripping down and burning you. If you happen to get a hot glue burn, quickly rub your hands together and get that hot glue off. You just don't want to let it sit there. So poking a little hole, adding a little dab of hot glue. It does not need to be much. And then putting that aside. It will cool in about 15 seconds and you'll be good to go. If you hit a tricky flower, one that's really hard to stem, sometimes finding a toothpick or something with a real small point and stemming or poking a little hole before you stem can help. And when all else fails, a little extra hot glue and some patience will absolutely do the trick. So I'm going to stem the rest of these flowers here, and then we'll be ready to arrange. You could stem as you go. I like to just do it all at once so that when it's time to arrange, it's a lot easier just to grab the flowers and not have to keep stopping to pick up my glue gun. I also recommend using a glue pot, which is a little bit like a crock pot for your glue, and you can dip your stems into that as well. Right now, these wires have been cut shorter. They're probably about 6 or 7 inches. They might be longer than you need in your arrangement, and so you could always cut and trim as you go. I save longer pieces, and you can always toss the smaller ones. One reason to stem as you go might be so that you could just sort of pay attention more to the wire length and cut them to the length that you need, and you may have a little bit less waste as well. You're going to notice when I stem these flowers, I'm holding on the sides that I don't crush any of the petals. There is some glycerin in the flowers that give it a little squish, so that I can do that. All right, so I've got my main flowers stemmed, and you could always add more later on, or other fillers or other greenery. And then I just like to organize mine by color so it's easy for me to grab when I'm ready. And then I decided I wanted to add one more flower in there. So I'm adding this nice little tea rose. All right, so we're going to bring our arrangement back over, and it is time to add them in. So one of the things that you want to think about is what color you're going to start with. Do you have a focal flower, a flower that you really love and is your absolute favorite? That's one of the flowers that you want to add in first, and then work from that color. So in this case, I'm adding the ivory tea rose in, and you want to add that somewhere towards the top and potentially angled out a little bit towards whatever you might consider to be the front. If your arrangement's going to be an all-around arrangement, that won't necessarily work perfectly because people will be looking at it from all angles. So just think about where you think that flower will be the most seen. From there, I'm going to add in my other ivory flowers, and I want to think about my arrangement like triangles. We want to work on the flow of the flowers through the piece. So if I'm looking at it from the top, I want to see little triangles with my ivory flowers. It doesn't need to be a perfect equilateral triangle, isosceles, whatever kind. But the idea is that you've got maybe an ivory flower on one corner, you've got one kind of moving up that triangle in another direction, and then coming back down. And what you're doing is creating a nice flow throughout your piece. You also want to think about your triangles when it comes to looking at your arrangement from the front, so from a different plane. And want to think about that height, that I wouldn't want to have all of my ivory flowers up top nice and high, or I wouldn't want to have them all down low. So I want to vary the heights and have that same sort of triangular idea going on in the plane with height. So we're thinking down low, something in the middle, something a little bit higher, and varying that up. And then I'm going to add in my next color of flowers. So I'm coming in with my blue flowers. I always save my most delicate looking flowers for last, the ones that might need to sit on top of other flowers and that I don't want to accidentally crush just because they're more delicate. So with the blue, same thing. I'm working on creating that flow throughout the piece and varying where I put those flowers, both when I look at it from the top and from the side. And then with the yellow, I'm going to come in, and at this point, while I still want to follow those rules and create that nice flow throughout the piece, I'm also looking to see, at this point, now that I've added some flowers, where are there some gaps? And so you'll see that I'll add these in, but then as I go, I might move them around a little bit, just because I'm not 100% certain where I want them to be. One thing you'll have to remember is that you're going to have fillers after this, so even if you have a few spots with gaps, totally okay. those are something that you could add a piece of filler in, or maybe an extra flower as well. And sometimes you just need to kind of shift around your flowers. I'm keeping the back of this arrangement a little bit more bare than the front and the sides. And that's because I'm gonna add that little fencing piece back in. If you were doing this as a box arrangement that was gonna be looked at from all around, then you'd wanna make sure that your flowers come out at all angles, and that you don't have a back that's sort of bare, unless you know it's gonna have something along the back or go up against a wall. So here I'm just being a little picky and I am rearranging my flowers. So when you look at it from different angles, you'll start to notice like, ooh, I don't know if I like where that one is, or maybe these two colors are too close together, and you can shift and you can move. You can pull the wires out, put them back in, but you can also bend the wires. That's the great thing about the floral wire, is that flexibility that you have. So I kind of like where it's at right now. Again, sometimes you could just keep moving them around and never be fully happy with it, but we're gonna go in with the fillers. So on these pieces in particular, they are in a big bunch, but you can also pull them apart into be smaller bunches. So if you pull off the sprigs, usually they'll just pop right off, or you could cut them off with scissors. You can kind of intersperse them more throughout the arrangement. So I'm going to actually start with one thicker chunk towards the back, where that little piece of fence is going to go. If I was just doing this as a regular box arrangement, I would maybe save that thicker bunch for the center and kind of move it throughout. But the rest I'm going to take and pull the sprigs off and put them in between. Now, you have some options. If you have enough greenery, you could add some hot glue to the end of the stem and just kind of nestle it in there and let it grab onto something in the arrangement. If it's tight enough in an arrangement and you can just kind of put it between some flowers and nestle it, it's not going to go anywhere, you'll be all set. But like I'm doing here, you could also actually stem these. Because I pulled them right off and didn't cut them, there's a little hole in the bottom of that sprig, and I can add a little bit of hot glue and a little piece of wire from what I cut earlier from my stems, and then I'll be able to poke it right into the floral foam and get it to go where I want. Benefit of this is you can also bend that stem and you can get it at any angle you want as well. So what's really important to me when I'm adding filler is I'm looking for where do I need to break up the colors. Where is there a gap where maybe I can see into the arrangement and there's not a flower there. I'm looking and considering both of those things, and then I'm looking at the whole big picture. So I gotta like put it back a little bit and just see, does it feel heavier with filler on one side and a little thinner on the other? Do I need to move a piece? You can cut fillers apart however you want, and there's so many options for fillers. You could add more than one color if you wanted as well. Here I'm just going to be adding the peach, but you could go crazy and add 2 or 3 colors. You can find things from your garden and dry them out and put them in your arrangement. Baby's breath makes a great option. You can just hang it upside down and dry it, and then cut off the stems and insert it in there as well. You can also leave it without fillers, but I do think that pop is really nice and will just finish off your arrangement beautifully. So as I'm checking this out from my angle, I'm kind of looking and trying different spots. I'm never 100% happy. I would think one of those things where I could probably fiddle with this forever. So I've got the basics of my arrangement here, but I already feel like I need to add a little bit more. So I want the stem to go towards the back just because I feel like there's a little height on the other side that I don't have on this side. So I want to have a piece that's popping up. Now you can nestle your filler down nice and low. You can have it be the thing that pops up and out of your arrangement, kind of like the overflow pieces that just add some fun and more movement to your piece as well. And then this is your time to just sort of look at it. If you've got a Lazy Susan, pop your arrangement on it and spin it. If not, you can just move it around and look at it from all the different angles and see, is there a spot where maybe you need to move a piece of filler, which is what I'm doing here. Do you need to change around where a flower is? Do you need to add something extra? And for me, it was this one corner. I just decided I didn't like how everything was falling on that side. And so I'm actually moving a flower in place of where I had a piece of filler and kind of switching them up to create a volume that I like a little bit more in my box. So I have got my arrangement done. And then this is the time where I can add this little fencing piece back in. So you could do this before, but because I wasn't sure how I was going to use this, I'm doing it after. What I would want to make sure here is that you glued this down. You could also add little nails, or you could use wood glue. You could use hot glue in a pinch, but over time, better to use the wood glue. Just to make sure that that holds, and then it actually comes with a little hanger, so you can hang this on a wall in your house or cut the twine off and just let it be a box arrangement as well. So with or without the fencing and the back, this is how you make a small box arrangement with wood flowers.